tens of thousands of killed, injured, and missing Palestinians, and extensive economic and infrastructural damages caused by Israel's attacks following the October 7th attack compel us to question whether Hamas' decision regarding this operation was deliberate and calculated. Irrespective of whether this decision was correct or incorrect, did Hamas have the right to make such an important decision on behalf of millions of Palestinians? In a document titled Our Narrative, published months after the war commenced, Hamas responds to these inquiries. Hamas considers this operation a legitimate defensive act against Israel's threats to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and plans to annex the West Bank to the occupied territories. Hamas has described the October 7th operation as a necessary response to decades of occupation of Palestinian lands, the failure of peace negotiations, and the international community's disregard for the Zionist entity's crimes against the Palestinian people. The struggle of the Palestinian people against colonialism and occupation has deep-seated roots predating October 7th by 105 years. 30 years of British colonial rule followed by 75 years of Zionist occupation. In 1918, the Palestinians owned 98.5% of the land of Palestine and constituted 92% of its population. Through extensive and coordinated immigration campaigns between British colonial authorities and the Zionist movement, Jews were brought to Palestine, and they managed to control over 6% of Palestinian lands while comprising 31% of the population before 1948, when the Zionist entity was declared in the historical Land of Palestine. Ignoring the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, Zionist terrorist groups aimed to displace them, carrying out widespread massacres. Consequently, the Zionist forces seized 77% of Palestinian land and displaced 57% of the Palestinian population. These atrocities culminated in the formation of the illegitimate Zionist regime in 1948. Moreover, Israeli forces occupied further areas of Palestine and surrounding Arab regions in 1967. Over decades of occupation, the Palestinian people have endured all manners of oppression and deprivation. For instance, the Gaza Strip has been under a severe blockade for 17 years since 2007, rendering it the world's largest open-air prison. Its people have endured 5 devastating wars, and all of which the Zionist entity was the aggressor. According to official statistics, from 2000 to 2023, the Zionist occupiers killed 11,299 Palestinians and injured 156,768, mostly civilians and children. Throughout these years, the U.S. government and its allies have comprehensively supported Israel, disregarding the suffering of the Palestinian people. The widespread human rights violations and massive crimes of the Zionist entity have been documented by international human rights organizations and even Israeli human rights groups. However, these reports and testimonies have been ignored, and the Zionist regime has remained unpunished. For example, in 2021, Israel's then ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, insulted the organization by tearing up one of its human rights reports against the Zionist regime's crimes. Yet, the following year, he was appointed vice president of the UN General Assembly. The U.S. government and its Western allies have consistently considered the Zionist regime immune from legal prosecution and supported it. They have allowed Israel to exploit this situation to seize more Palestinian land and change the identity of its religious sites. Despite the issuance of over 900 UN resolutions in favor of the Palestinian people, Israel has adhered to none of them. The U.S. has also continued to prevent the condemnation of Israel's policies through vetoes. Therefore, the U.S. and its allies are major partners of this regime in Israel's brutal crimes and killings against the Palestinian people. Despite the Oslo Accords in 1993 aimed at establishing an independent Palestinian state, Israel has eliminated any possibility of its establishment through the construction of illegal settlements and altering the identity of Palestinian lands. After 30 years, supporters of negotiations and peace now realize they have reached a dead end, and this idea has had disastrous consequences for Palestinians. Israeli officials have also repeatedly expressed their opposition to the establishment of a Palestinian state. In September 2023, the Israeli Prime Minister presented a map depicting Israel's borders extending to the Mediterranean Sea, effectively claiming Gaza's territory. Still, this point was met with silence from countries and international bodies. Given the Palestinian people's years of oppression and endless suffering, as well as the failure of all efforts for peace and the return of their lost rights, Operation Al-Aqsa Storm was the only remaining option for the Palestinian nation, which it has arrived at through its historical path of struggle. Plans for Judaizing Al-Aqsa Mosque and attempts to temporally and spatially divide it, along with escalating incursions by extremist Zionists, are a blatant violation of the rights of the Palestinian people and a continuation of the expansionist policies of the Zionist entity. The actions of the extremist and right-wing government of the Zionist entity to annex the West Bank and Jerusalem, and the existence of plans for the widespread expulsion of Palestinians from their homeland are violations of their fundamental human and international rights. Thousands of Palestinian political prisoners are subjected to torture and heinous abuse in the prisons of the Zionist occupiers, under the direct supervision of regime officials. The unjust blockade of the Gaza Strip for over 17 years, with the closure of land, sea, and air borders, continues. The growing expansion of illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank and systematic and daily violence against Palestinians, while millions of Palestinian refugees live in difficult conditions, are among other criminal acts of the Zionist entity against the Palestinian nation. Hamas states that during Operation Al-Aqsa Storm, it primarily targeted military centers and positions of the Zionist entity and attempted to prevent harm to civilians, especially children and women. Another goal was to capture enemy soldiers to pressure Israeli authorities into releasing thousands of Palestinians held by the Zionist regime. Hamas emphasizes that their war is with the Zionist project, not with Jews because of their religion. They oppose the oppression of Jews during the Nazi era and state that the problem of Jews belongs to Europe. Given such crimes by the Zionist entity, did the Palestinian people and freedom fighters have any choice other than Operation Al-Aqsa Storm? The Palestinian nation had tried all options and effectively had no other way to claim its rights. And Operation Al-Aqsa Storm marks the beginning of the end of more than 7 decades of Zionist occupation.